Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I thought I would share with you our holiday celebration plans, homeschooling for the month of December. So if you're new here, I have a almost 10-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and an almost 3-year-old, and during the month of December, we of course we do an Advent study. We are Christians, specifically Lutheran, specifically ELCA denomination, if you're curious. So we do a specific Advent study. We also talk about different religious holidays that come up for other cultural beliefs. So for example, Hanukkah, I will link up above what we studied last year. Last year was an emphasis on Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. So we looked into those different traditions and learned about that. This year we will be looking at our Advent study, and we will specifically be looking at St. Lucia Day. Now, I am not one for unit studies. I've said that in previous videos that I don't really like them. I don't think they're put together very well. I don't think sources are often cited. And a lot of the Christmas unit studies I have found are heavily Christian, which is completely fine, but I do enjoy talking about other religious beliefs in our household and honoring those and being culturally appropriate when talking about those and doing activities around them. So that being said, I don't often rely on unit studies, especially when it comes to Christmas season or the holiday season. My philosophy is bring in some good resources, bring in some good picture books, and just have some open conversations and a few activities. Nothing that's really intensive. This December especially is a busy time of year for us, so adding on more workload for us isn't helpful. How we handle it with homeschool is every Friday, this will be the only thing we do. Advent study we'll be doing every day because it's really quick. But for example, when we're concentrating on learning about St. Lucia, we will be doing that on Fridays. We'll be reading the books, we'll doing an activity. So I have it broken down with which thing I will be doing when, but first I will talk about our Advent study. So much like my video from last year, the Advent study we do is from ELC World Hunger, and this is a completely free resource online. You can order these for free, shipping free, sent to you. We also do the little Advent calendar as well. So I will start with, the Advent calendar. So the Advent calendar, each day you open a box, and some days it's just a scripture reading for you to talk about and discuss. Some day it's like this one is a music study, which is really interesting because I found my favorite hymn from last year's Advent calendar, which if you're curious is the Canticle of Turning, which is all about, Jesus being a social justice warrior, which I love. So if you've never heard of that, check out Canticle of Turning. It's a really great song. So again, I really we usually will just bring these up on YouTube. We have obviously hymnal at home as well that we can reference, but it's just a really interesting way to listen to songs we don't necessarily hear very much. Some of them are prayers, so you'll be praying for a specific group of people. Or for example, this one is to care for our neighbors and one another. Some of them are acts of service, so just something simple as bringing your neighbor cookies or donating Toys for Tots, things like that. They also have in here because this is ELC World Hunger, they obviously it's non-for-profit that raise money for buying things like a cow for a family, educational expenses for a family, different things you can do. I'll link their website down below, but we also participate that every year. Some of these are just informational things like, if you bought this is how it would help someone. And there's only a few of those scattered within, but this is a really nice, quick thing that my kids really enjoy popping the thing, and we learn a little deeper about Advent, which is nice. Now, same resource, is the ELC World Hunger Advent Study for 2022. And what I really like about these studies, again, is it's quick. So this would be obviously Advent. You have 4 sessions. So this would be the session, the psalm you're concentrating on. So it goes through the psalm, some explanation to it. And then what it does is, after the reading you do and the analysis of it, it talks about a specific example of how the ELCA is helping with those situations. So for example, this one was talking about how the Lutheran communion in South Africa helped build and support a school in Zimbabwe. and they have solar powered community centers, so access to computers, things like that. And one of the needs they noticed is that the females would often miss school because of their periods, because they didn't have access to sanitary pads or anything like that. So they were on a mission to teach not only girls but boys about the menstrual cycle, sanitary pads, the importance of that, and set up a foundation and an ability to have those supplies available to women, but also to educate and how you can make reusable pads, things like that. So I really like that it has that tie-in, as you're not just reading a specific part of scripture, but you're seeing how that applies to real life usage. And then every single one will have reflection questions or like discussion questions to go over it. And some of the questions, for example, is why do you think it was important to help both boys and girls understand the use for sanitary pads? So it's, I think, a really well put together Advent study. So for example, this would be session 2. It gives you the psalm reading. You go over the psalm, you go over what it's about, how it kind of addresses to now, and then it'll have the same thing. So for example, this reading was talking about helping those in need and poverty, and it's just little things like this that I really like. It says the biblical witness teaches us that the best leaders are not the ones who pray the hardest or in the most visible ways, but those whose prayers lead to action, specifically action on behalf of people in poverty and need. And it talks about a church and how they had a need in their community where there was a lot of older buildings, lead paint. It was affecting children in the area. So they provided not only free lead testing kits, but also help cleaning up and dealing with the lead in those impoverished communities, which I think is really important to know. So again, you're learning about the importance of the psalm, how it relates to now, and how you can go out and act and be a part of it. And then of course it's got the reflection questions as well. So again, that will go through the 4 Sundays in Advent. It's got a little place for notes. And again, this is a really wonderfully written resource, completely free, much better than most unit studies I've seen. So now talking about St. Lucia Day, I debated, what specific religious or celebration to talk about this year. I was almost gonna do St. Nicholas Day, but I think I'll leave that to next year because I really want to dive deeper into that. So if you have any resources for St. Nicholas Day or Santa Claus, the history of it, that kind of thing, we do also celebrate Santa in our house if you're curious. But that will be next year. But this year, we touched a little bit on St. Lucia Day or St. Lucia Day last year when we did our Advent around the world. Again, see that video if you want to learn more. And my kids were intrigued by it. So I said, okay, let's roll with this one. So we do have, I'll share some of the resources we're using. We do have this book that I got from the library a long time ago. I think it was a quarter, but part of it does have a little St. Lucia Day and just a little brief description of what they do and why. And then I found, like I said, a lot of picture book resources. Now, unfortunately, my library had none of them. I don't know if it's because we don't have a lot of Swedish population in this area or it's not well known, but none of the libraries or the surrounding libraries had any of the books, which was kind of disappointing. And I'm not going to go out and buy 5 or 6 books, maybe 1 or 2, but again, I live within a budget, especially around Christmas. I don't have the resources to go out and buy a bunch of books. Even on thrift books, they weren't available. So I was lucky enough to find every single one of these resources, except one, was a YouTube video. So if you don't know, a lot of times people will read books on YouTube for, school use or whatever, and they'll be free to use. So every one of these books I found was free. So I'm going to go over them really quick, and I'll pop a little picture up here of the book. So the books we will be using are Lucia, Morning in Sweden, and this just goes over a family celebration of St. Lucia Day, how they get ready, and just the different cultural traditions of it. Again, a YouTube video we'll be watching. Next one we have is Who Are You, St. Lucia? And this is just a picture book going over kind of the celebration of it and why it's important, and then what you can do, how you can bring that into your life, and how the the spirit of St. Lucia can go on throughout the year, not just this time of year. Next we have Lucia, Saint of Light. Now this one is probably the most informational book we'll read. So it goes over a family that's getting ready for St. Lucia Day, and then the kids, of course, ask, why do we do this? Why or do we have these traditions and things like that? And it goes into more the historical narrative of St. Lucia and kind of how she became a saint. So that one is good. We have Hannah's Christmas, which I think this will be a really good one because my youngest daughter looks very similar to this, which is funny. She must have some, Swedish blood in her. But Hannah's Christmas is all about a girl who recently moved from Sweden to America, and she's afraid that her traditions will be lost. Nothing is like it is in Sweden, and she gets visited from a tomten. I believe that's how it's pronounced, kind of like a winter gnome. And he does mischievous things, and finally she puts on her St. Lucia crown and celebrates Sweden, or her Swedish beliefs, even in America. And it's just a nice story. One of the last picture books we'll do is Lucia and the Light. Now this doesn't specifically talk about the celebrations of it. It's kind of just goes parallel with Lucia, the Saint Lucia. So it's about a girl who, it's very dark because Saint Lucia is celebrated on winter solstice, December 13th, the darkest day of the year. So it talks about how it's very dark where she lives, the plants aren't growing, the animals aren't coming out, her family has needs, they're running out of food, so she goes in search of the sun, and in search of the sun she encounters trolls and things that try to stop her, and she has to be clever and brave and courageous in order to bring the sun back so her family can have food again. And it's just a wonderful story about bringing the light into our world and not focusing so much on the darkness. Another book we'll be doing as a read aloud, it's American Girl book. My daughter does like the newer versions of American Girl books. We've never really read the more classic ones, but this is Kirsten's Surprise. I want to say Kirsten, or Christian's Surprise, but it talks about a girl, again, Swedish beliefs, kind of what's going on, how she celebrates, and I think it'll just be a nice read aloud to have to kind of emphasize the season of St. Lucia. The other informational book that we will be using is Lucia, Child of Light, The History and Traditions of Sweden's Lucia Celebration. And again, this is just a more informational book. This is the one book I could not find. It's Amazon, any of that. I mean, Thrift Books had it, but it was like $25. I'm not paying $25 for a book. Luckily, I was able to interlibrary loan it, but I can't show you guys what's inside, at least not now, because I don't have it, because it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get it. So hopefully it'll be here in time for St. Lucia Day, but that will be kind of what we're drawing a lot of our information from. Now, for some of the activities, so when we read the St. Lucia book that specifically talks about how she became a saint, our activities, we're going to do a Christmas walk near us. There's a horse-drawn carriage that goes through the Christmas lights, and I thought that would be a really nice way to celebrate St. Lucia, the lights in the darkness. So that will be one of our activities. Some of the other activities we will be doing is we will be making the crowns, and again, cultural appropriation. I want to make sure I'm being respectful of the resources I'm using, but also not, playing dress up with another person's culture. So with this, I feel comfortable doing that. My husband, his side, is obviously have that descent of Swedishness, as my daughter very much represents it, and they are Catholic on his side and things like that. So I feel comfortable enough to bring that into, because it is intertwined with our family. So we have again, if you want any of these resources, let me know. I can link them. But it's just a felt crown that I think the kids will enjoy making. Another thing we're going to be doing is making little peg dolls. I'll insert a picture of what it's supposed to look like. But my kids love making dolls and sticker books and paper dolls and all that. So I think they're going to have a lot of fun. And every year we try to make some kind of craft that becomes a Christmas decoration every year. For example, they've made a menorah. We have a menorah that comes out during the holiday season. We have, since we did Kwanzaa last year, we have a Canera, which is their candle, and why it's important to them. So I hope after, 18 years living at home, we'll have all these different cultural or religious or just holiday celebrations from around the world, different beliefs. And it's important to me to bring those aspects into my home and into my child's life because we live in a very Anglo-Saxon, very Christian-based community, and they don't get exposures to any of those things. I've said in the past, we don't have synagogues, we don't have mosques, we don't have anything other than Christian churches out where we live. So I want them to experience these things in a culturally appropriate way, of course, and respectful, but I want them to experience these things and realize that there are many different beliefs out there. No one is better than the other, but to be respectful of each one. So that is kind of my plan. The little peg dolls will become future Christmas decoration or holiday celebrations that we put out in the month of December. The other thing we'll be doing, there are certain recipes that we'll be tackling. Again, we'll probably have 3 Fridays in December where we can do these things. So we'll do, a couple books, we'll do one of the activities, we'll do a recipe. One of the recipes we have is ginger snap cookies and gingerbread men. We're actually making specifically gingerbread houses. We're our homeschool co-op, so that's kind of one of the activities we'll be doing, which I think will be really fun because we have so many different food issues in my house. If you didn't know, my youngest has celiac disease, so we're a gluten-free family of 5. My son has a dairy soy intolerance. So I just last year broke down and bought a gingerbread making kit, so the little cookie cutouts to make it, and it actually turned out really cool. If I have time this year, maybe I'll make a video of it. But it's pretty big, and it comes with all the little snowman and reindeer, whatever you want to add to it. And the nice thing is we can eat it. My kids slowly eat that gingerbread house over time. So that's how we'll be celebrating one of the Fridays. Another thing we'll be doing is making the Lucia or the Lucia cats, the little braided buns, or the saffron buns they're sometimes called. We'll be making one of the Fridays, we'll be making those as well. And I think December is a great time to get in the kitchen and baking. I'm not one to enjoy board games or going outside in the cold weather, but baking, I'm right there for it. So I'm really excited for the different things we'll be able to do, the things we'll be able to make, and just not put so much pressure on ourselves that it has to follow a specific schedule or a specific study, that we can organically, using research resources, to bring that information into our lives. And one of the other resources I'll be using, I'll insert a picture here, is my husband has a book of the lives of all the saints. If you didn't know, he's a pastor. So he has this huge book about all, where the information comes from, how they became a saint. So that is something we will also be touching on from that resource as well. So if you have any questions, leave them down below. If not, thank you for watching.